On September 9th, 1980, Hurricane Orchid struck the Pacific Ocean. The winds reached hurricane force, and waves rose as high as 5-story buildings. And into the center of this inferno, a ship plowed its way. But it wasn't just any ship. It was the MV Derbisher, a steel behemoth the length of 3 football fields. Imagine the Eiffel Tower lying on its side. This behemoth was far larger than the legendary Titanic, a quarter longer and almost twice as wide. The Derbisher was the largest British ship of its era, with a mass equivalent to 4 Titanic ships. On the bridge stood Captain Geoffrey Underhill, a seasoned seaman with 20 years of experience at sea. He had steered ships through hurricanes before and knew his ship could withstand any blow nature could throw at it. After all, the Derbisher had been built just 4 years earlier in the legendary British shipyard that had supplied warships to the Royal Navy for centuries. It was a next-generation ship, embodying all the technology of the 1970s. Double hull, reinforced bulkheads, and powerful water-pumping systems, like an unsinkable steel fortress. The captain reduced speed to a minimum and turned her bow with the waves, a standard procedure in storms. The last radio message was, "Things under control." There were 44 people on board, the crew and the wives of 2 officers, all experienced professionals, sailors, engineers, and mechanics. Captain Underhill's wife was waiting for him in Japan. After 2 months of separation, they wanted to spend a few days together. The ship had completed a long voyage. It left a Canadian port with a cargo of iron ore, crossed the Atlantic, circled Africa, and crossed the Indian Ocean. Only a few miles separated it from its destination. The Derbisher was a special ship, a universal cargo ship capable of carrying almost anything: oil, grain, and iron ore. A revolutionary idea at the time, never to sail empty, transporting oil in one direction and loading the ore for the return journey. There were only 6 ships of this type in the world, all built in Great Britain and all considered the pinnacle of engineering. By midnight, the ocean had become a seething cauldron. Some waves reached the ship's length, nearly 300 meters of turbulent water. The ship crested its crest like a roller coaster and then plunged into a deep hollow between walls of water. Tons of seawater crashed onto the deck, and the wind whipped the spray into a horizontal rain that pounded with the force of machine gun fire. In the engine room, engineers monitored the engines. Everything was going according to plan. The powerful diesel engines roared steadily, and the pumps kept up with the endless flow of water. In their cabins, some crew members tried to rest, strapping themselves into their beds to keep from being thrown off by the sudden jolts. Some played cards, others read, trying to ignore the fierce winds outside. The Typhoon Orchid was unpredictable. It changed course several times. 3 different weather reports gave 3 different forecasts. The captain chose a course that would take the ship away from all possible storm paths, but the ocean played by its own rules. At 3:00 a.m., radio contact with the Derbisher was suddenly cut off. No distress signals, no distress calls, just silence. The next morning, as the typhoon weakened, 2 other ships in the same area arrived safely in port. Their captains reported that they had survived one of the worst storms of their careers, and they had. The Derbisher did not contact them an hour later, a day later, or even a week later. At first, the owners, a Liverpool company, didn't panic. Radio antennas often break in severe storms. But when a week passed and the ship still hadn't appeared in any Japanese port, they finally sounded the alarm. Official search efforts didn't begin until 6 days after the disappearance. Japanese warships, helicopters, and patrol planes methodically scoured every stretch of the sea. They looked for everything: wreckage, life rafts, oil spills, and floating debris. But the ocean was completely clean. This defied all rules. When a ship sinks, no matter which one, something always surfaces: wooden furniture, plastic packaging, life jackets, documents. Here, there was nothing. It was as if a skyscraper-sized vessel had simply been deflated. After 2 weeks, the search was called off. The official conclusion was succinct. The ship had been lost in a storm. No investigation into the causes, no analysis, no questions. By comparison, when the Titanic sank, the investigation took years. Every detail was examined, and hundreds of witnesses were interviewed. In that case, a ship 4 times its size was simply written off as another victim of the sea. The only find was an empty Derbisher lifeboat, discovered by a Japanese tanker a month and a half later. For the victims' families, this investigation was a real insult. More than a third of the crew were from Liverpool, the city where the ship's owner was based. These people couldn't have simply disappeared. Among those who refused to accept the official version was Peter Ridyard. In this disaster, Peter had lost his son, a 25-year-old engineer. But Ridyard Sr. was more than just a grieving father. He had worked all his life as a ship surveyor, examining the technical condition of ships. He knew how ships were built, their weak points, and what malfunctions could occur. And he knew for certain, Derbisher-class ships didn't just disappear without a trace. Peter began his own investigation. The first thing he discovered was that the Derbisher was one of 6 identical ships, all built in the same shipyard to the same design. They were considered flagships of the fleet, British merchant, pride of the nation. A year and a half after the Derbisher disappeared, another ship from the same series was caught in a storm in the North Sea. While at sea, cracks appeared in the forward part of the hull. The captain managed to launch a distress signal, and the crew was rescued by helicopter. The ship was towed to port in time. That's when Rudyard began further investigation. He contacted the owners of the 4 remaining ships in the series and discovered a shocking fact. Cracks had been discovered in all 4 of them in exactly the same place, in the forward part of the hull. All the ships had been quietly and unnoticed recalled for urgent repairs. But why? The answer lies in the financial reports. In the 1970s, the shipyard fell on hard times. Japanese and South Korean shipyards were offering the same ships at cheaper prices and building them faster. To survive, the British shipyard began cutting costs, using cheaper steel, simplifying designs, and deviating significantly from the original blueprints. Peter sent the documents he had compiled to the Ministry of Transport several times, but he received no response. Then he went to the press, but the story received no attention. Undeterred, Rudyard helped found the Derbisher Association of Families of the Missing. This was no longer just a personal tragedy, but an organized movement for the truth. The turning point came in November 1986. Another ship in the series was en route with a shipment of iron ore from Canada. In the North Atlantic, large cracks suddenly appeared in the forward hull. The ship sought refuge in an Irish bay, but 2 days later, a storm swept it from its moorings. Losing control, it struck rocks and broke in half. This time, the crew managed to survive. Now the authorities could no longer ignore the problem. An official investigation was opened. Experts spent 6 months studying documents, charts, and to interview witnesses. Peter Ridyard handed over all his documents. The families hoped to finally learn the truth. 9 years after the disaster, the report was published. The families only learned about it from the newspapers. The verdict was, no structural defects were found in the bridge-class ships. The Derbisher sank solely due to the forces of nature, probably after a loss of control in a storm. This was a slap in the face to everyone waiting for answers. But the families of the deceased did not give up. In the early 1990s, disturbing information leaked to the press. Large cargo ships were disappearing with alarming regularity into the ocean, almost always with their entire crew. In just 14 years, nearly 150 bulk cargo ships had been washed ashore, and more than 1,000 seafarers had lost their lives. Worse still, Most of these tragedies had never been officially investigated. Even then, the authorities stubbornly refused to resume the search for the Derbisher. 14 years after the tragedy, the Family Association, with the support of the International Seafarers Union, raised funds for an unprecedented private expedition, without any government assistance. Equipped with the latest deep-sea sonar technology, the research vessel set sail in the Pacific Ocean, reaching the point where the Derbisher had transmitted its last coordinates. Amazingly, the Derbisher was found after just 1 day of searching. It lay at a depth of 4 kilometers, deeper than the highest mountains in Europe. It wasn't a hull torn in half like the Titanic, nor a field of scattered debris. Before them lay a massive, almost intact steel structure, resting motionless in the eternal cold of the deep sea. We spent the next 6 years meticulously examining the ship's hull. Deep-sea robots took hundreds of thousands of images, which experts used to create a highly detailed 3D model of the wreck. It wasn't until 2000 that the answer became clear, and the truth about why the disaster was truly shocking. A massive ship, the size of 3 football fields, built to withstand the force of the ocean, was doomed to sink because of a single small steel door, no larger than an average apartment door. At the bow of the ship was a modest storage room for ropes, paint, and tools. According to the plan, it was supposed to be protected by a tightly sealed, reinforced door, capable of withstanding the impact of a wave weighing several tons. However, during construction, a simple thin steel door was installed, the same type used in crew cabins. Simple negligence and cost-cutting cost the lives of dozens and caused the passenger liner to sink to the bottom. When the Derbisher encountered the hurricane, the waves crashed directly onto its bow. Scientists later calculated that the ship may have encountered a rogue wave as high as a 6-story building. A particularly powerful wave simply smashed through the storage room door. Water poured in. Within minutes, thousands of tons of seawater flooded the small space. The bow of the ship grew heavier and sank deeper into the water. The waves no longer slammed against the high side of the hull, but directly onto the deck. Ventilation pipes were ripped open, and water began to flood the cargo holds. In the engine room, the crew was still trying to process what was happening. They heard the ship slam and felt it tilt forward, but didn't realize they had less than 2 minutes to go. Then a domino effect occurred. The water in the bow compartment pushed the ship's bow deeper into the turbulent sea as if it were stuck in sand. The waves rolled across the deck and tore off the hatch covers, steel plates the size of a tennis court. These covers were designed to withstand normal loads, but the hurricane generated much greater pressure. When the water entered the first cargo hold, which contained the iron ore, the ship was lost. Iron ore, when mixed with seawater, turns into something like liquid concrete, an extremely heavy mass. The ship was immediately pulled down. One by one, its holds filled with water. In less than 2 minutes, the giant disappeared beneath the waves, at such a rapid speed that the radio operator didn't even have time to press a distress signal. The Derbisher tragedy and the shocking truth about its cause shook the shipping world. It became clear, if nothing changed, it could happen again at any time, to any ship in any ocean. After the publication of the final report in 2000, the shipping industry underwent a veritable revolution. The British government issued 24 recommendations to improve safety, united and unanimously adopted by the international maritime community. Shipbuilders significantly tightened forward compartment standards, completely redesigned cargo hatch covers, made water detectors mandatory in cargo holds, installed cameras on the bows of all large cargo ships, and required all merchant vessels to use black boxes. These changes have saved hundreds of ships and thousands of lives over the past 25 years. Today, cargo ships sink far less frequently than they did in the 1980s. In 2018, a bronze memorial bearing the names of all 44 victims was placed in a Liverpool church garden, Divers also attached a plaque to the Derbisher's hull at the bottom of the sea. The MV Derbisher remains moored in the Pacific Ocean, 4 kilometers below the surface. In the pitch darkness, under the pressure of the water, the steel giant has become an eternal memorial, a memorial to the folly and negligence of the people who sank a great ship, but also to the perseverance and resilience that finally brought the horrific truth from the depths to light. Without Peter Ridyard and the other relatives of the victims, and without their 14-year struggle, the world might never have known the truth. How many more Derbishers would have sailed with the same fatal design flaw? No one can say. The story of one ship changed global shipping forever, and the price of those changes was 44 human lives and 14 years of a father's struggle to ensure the world would not forget.